Great. Hello and welcome to another rather exciting webinar. I'm joined today by Hiren Panchal and with Andrea Varga, both from WENSONS. You're welcome to say hello. We'll start with Hiren.
Good afternoon. Hello and welcome, everyone.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Andrea.
Thank you both. This webinar is all going to be about financial well-being for employers and employees. And hopefully it's all going to give us a real sense of what the topic really means to us, because it's quite an everyday topic: money, financial literacy, and how both employers and employees can help complement one another on this particular topic. Now, without further ado, I'll pass on to Hiren, and you can tell us a little bit more about the topic. But before I do that, I wonder whether those who are here at the moment, if you could please put into the chat box, which of these areas of well-being do you believe are the most important? Which of these do you think is the most important? Mental well-being, physical well-being, social well-being, financial well-being, and no hints or tips here, career well-being, community, or something completely different. What sort of well-being is most important to you? And I'll repeat those: mental, physical, social, financial, career, community, or something completely different which might be unique to you. Please put that in the chat, and Hiren, I'll pass on to you in the meantime. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Roy. Well, let me start with some introductions. My name is Hiren Panchal. I'm a husband to a very tolerant and loving wife, papa to 4 superhumans. Outside of family life, I'm a qualified financial planner and founder of WENSONS Financial, as well as a certified financial coach and founder of WENSONS Legacy. Today, I'm hoping to do is firstly ask questions: what is well-being? Well-being is not about being happy, wealthy, or beautiful. Well-being is not just about one piece of who you are. You're more valuable than the collective. Well-being is a combination of our physical self, our financial security, loving what we do each day. Oh, hello.
That's one of the superheroes.
Absolutely. I know that voice. And as I sort of reiterate, well-being is a combination of our physical self, our financial security, loving what we do each day, and the quality of our relationships and contributing to our communities. So a question gets asked is, where does well-being come from? Well-being emerges from our thoughts, actions, and experiences, most of which you have control over. For example, when we think positive, we tend to have greater emotional well-being. When we pursue meaningful relationships, we tend to have better social well-being. And when we lose our job or just hate it, we tend to have lower workplace well-being. These examples start to reveal how broad well-being really is and how many different types of well-being there are. It's about a mindful, purposeful life, and it looks different for every person. There can be many definitions of the components of well-being, but all seek to describe the various elements that encompass who we are and what we pursue. In a comprehensive Gallup study of people in more than 150 countries, researchers identified 5 universal sort of interconnected elements that shape our lives. These being physical well-being, financial well-being, career well-being, social well-being, and community well-being. I see that from the chats, people have noted that all of the above are also important. I was going to pick if any were added to the list there. But going to sort of describe a few of those. Do you have strength and energy to live your life the way you want? This would come under physical well-being, which encompasses strength and stability, the form and function. It can be 10 minutes of walking, 20 minutes of yoga, or hard-hitting spin classes. Regardless of the goal or physical well-being is the same: to empower you to be stronger, healthier, and more energized for what you love. Then comes down to, do you love what you do? Career well-being is about how you occupy your time. Do you experience a sense of satisfaction in your profession? Again, from the Gallup study, it quotes, "You don't need to earn a paycheck to have a thriving career well-being, but you do need to find something you enjoy doing." and have an opportunity to do it every day. Whether that means working in an office, volunteering, raising your children, or starting your own business, what matters most is being engaged in the career or occupation you choose. Do you have strong connections to others? Social well-being focuses on your relationships and how you connect with others. When we have positive relationships, we are happier, healthier, and more productive. Developing deep roots in our relationships requires an investment of time, energy, but this is the most important investment we can make. Social well-being is about making time and engaging with your support system and those you respect. Do you feel a sense of pride or belonging in your community? Community well-being is concerned with your relationship to the greater public. There is great emphasis on volunteerism and altruism. And then finally, do you feel financially secure? Financial well-being is more than your income. It is how comfortable you are with your money, short and long term. It's about knowing your financial position and being comfortable with or creating your plan. Financial well-being is about effectively managing your economic life. Now, because each part of well-being is important to your overall sense of well-being, it's important to think of it like this. Imagine you are in a car, your engine works great, and maybe your transmission works pretty well too, but your brakes don't work. Now, because your brakes don't work, it doesn't really matter how well your engine works, because you're still going to have trouble going about your life. So the same is true about well-being. If everything else in your life is going great, but you feel lonely or you're eating unhealthfully, other areas of your life will be affected and you likely wouldn't feel as well as you want to. So today, what I would like to hopefully achieve is the importance of financial well-being and the role everyone plays, the current challenges and the practices and useful approaches and tips we can hopefully impart. And on that, I'd like to pass on to Andrea, who will be covering more around financial well-being. Hopefully that gives you a bit of a background.
Thank you. So just to recap on what Hiren said as well, if we think about well-being in general, it has received, more attention in recent years. And, there have been lots of initiatives that employees have welcomed from the employers to promote physical health. It could even be financial health as well. And what is really great, I think, is, as Hiren mentioned as well, is well-being actually is looked at from a holistic point of view. So all the different aspects, whether you list 5, 10 or everything else, and I added just a few of the spiritual and the emotional well-being as well, and I think nowadays digital well-being. And just like all the other areas, financial well-being as well has received a lot more attention, in the sense that it actually highlighted everything that we have been going through, not just the pandemic, Brexit before, as well as the war that's happening at the moment, and on the impact that we are experiencing now, and lots of things are just about to happen as well. So creating more focus and emphasis on financial resilience, and highlighting probably the gaps as well that we have about our skill sets, about our capability as well. So I think it is very important that we highlight, as Hiren said, the importance of financial well-being, and bring that aspect to the table as well. And when we think about financial well-being, often you might think about, and some of the resources that you hear as well is about financial distress, or the lack of, to achieve financial well-being, meaning that the lack of, or removing or reducing financial distress or financial anxiety, which is very, very important. However, there are lots of other aspects as well. So it's not just about the removing the anxiety and the distress, but also how do you balance this holistic approach? How does money impact all the other areas of your life? How can you make sure that you use it well to positively impact the other areas, as well as, you know, looking at the other areas of well-being and how can you utilize that to have a positive impact on your finances and your financial well-being. It is also about, you know, as I mentioned, financial resilience. You know, how can we adapt? How can we prepare and plan for the unexpected and make sure that we can handle, you know, whatever is coming our way and whatever we face. So it's like, you know, preparing for a training session. Is we need to train, we need to gain we need to make sure that we have, you know, awareness, we build some knowledge, and we also have the skills to do that. So basically, this is what financial capability is. But a lot more than that, it's not just about if I know how to do, you know, what to do with my money, that's not enough. Do I have the right mindset? Do I have the right motivation? And do I have the behaviors, you know, that will actually achieve improved financial well-being and hopefully enable me to have, we can also talk about a financial future, you know, and financial security. So what I want to highlight is when you think of financial well-being, you know, think about it not just, yes, definitely the reducing financial anxiety and distress, but at the same time is balancing, you know, planning short-term and long-term, because it's not just about the here and now. Can I be well financially? Can I be okay now? But do I then have the capacity? Do I have the competence and the tools to prepare for the future as well? So it's about now as well as the future. And it's not just about, you know, the money elements of it. It's also about what are the things that makes me happy and what are the things that I find purposeful. So it's the joy and the purpose side of it as well. Because, you know, you can think it's not just about I don't have money or I have a lot of money. Financial well-being impacts and affects everybody. I have some of the clients we had and some of the people we work with. Actually, it doesn't matter whether you don't have money or you have lots of money, you can still have challenges, and it doesn't, as they say, money doesn't make you happy. But if you know how to use it and use it for the things that give you joy and purpose, and plan for your future, then you have a chance of achieving that financial well-being.
Yeah, Andrea, really good points you mentioned. And I think you're going to talk about this later in terms of CIPD facts, and you can explain what all that is too in a moment. But I think on that particular topic, one of the stats really caught my eye, and it was all about what matters most to employees. And so employers take note, and employees, I wonder whether, and you're welcome to put in the chat box whether these resonate with you or not before I come to my previous question in the chat. But in terms of what mattered most to employees, the highest one was around 75%. And that 75% of employees said that earning a wage sufficient enough for them to enjoy, for them and their families or loved ones to enjoy life to a reasonable standard. That was the highest thing that was important to them. And then next, well, 55% was to be able to save reasonably for the future. 54% just wanted to be paid a fair wage in a consistent manner. And 45% of people said that they wanted, what was important to them was to be able to take care of existing debts. And again, I appreciate you're going to talk about that later. I wonder whether some of these things resonate with people, but from a couple of people who responded in the chat box, they've said that their employer doesn't have a financial well-being policy at all. And I think one person mentioned that they haven't got a specific financial well-being policy, but it's integrated into a well-being policy. And I appreciate you've set the scene, but I wonder whether any of these things resonate with you and some of the other facts and research you do in this area.
I think a very relevant point, and probably while kind of we're waiting and while I'm talking as well, I would also be interested to know if you do have, you know, a financial well-being policy integrated within other areas, what are the things that you have in place as an employer or as an employee as well? You know, what are the things that you have and that actually you appreciate or that works? And I think there might be areas that we talk about is that employers, I find they do have things in place, but we might not realize that this financial well-being, so we can talk about that. But anything that you have, even personally, if you have things that work for you, feel free to share in the chat, and then we'll open it up. Roy will open up a Q&A later on as well. What he was referring to about, and it was in the invite as well, one of the reports, and I mean, within the HR world, CIPD has got really good reports, and I can share the link as well about financial well-being. They recently launched, I think they shared one about poverty at work, so very shocking figures as well, and it's well worth having a look. If you're an employer, if you're in HR, if you're in L&D, it is the best place for you to go to, because they have all the resources. And when I was doing my research, interestingly, 2017, 5 years ago, CIPD already gave the answer, what do employers need to do? What do we need to do? And I just wonder if, more employers and organizations had implemented those, would we still be in the same position now? So sometimes it's, the resources are there, never too late, but, it's good to, take action.
Just to sort of add, no, absolutely. I was going to just to add to that as well. Financial well-being has become sort of a coined term most recently. You hear more and more of it, but it's not necessarily a new thing, because this has been around for a number of years, and it's just the elements of the focus. When you talk both from an employer side and employees, it tends to sort of get other areas of well-being that get more of a focus than financial well-being. But I'm sure Andrea will also cover a little bit later of how much more that actually sort of creates the distress part to then affect the rest of the areas. So I think it's quite a eye-opener in that way. So trying to sort of get resources where it's most required is, I suppose, the elements of where we're all trying to get to in terms of best practice or sharing best practices. Yeah.
And I mean, in the report I was referencing, CIPD did say that financial well-being is the least common area included in HR strategies, despite money worries affecting 47% of UK employees, so basically half. And although around half of employers do have a financial well-being policy in place, and only 11% are actively focusing on it as part of their overall HR and well-being strategy. So I suspect, many organizations do have it. Some might not call it financial well-being policy, but hopefully by the end of the session today, we'll a little bit have a better understanding of it as well. I mean, until I started in this area, there's loads of things I didn't know. So that's the awareness. First of all, we need to bring this awareness. That's the baseline of everything, is making sure that we can build that capabilities. Step one is awareness. Do employees know what you have in place as an employer? Do they know what's out there? What are the resources available? And then talk about the necessary knowledge and the skills that we need. And in L&D, I mean, Carl will know, we worked together before, it's about that experiential part of it and the just-in-time resources, make it practical, something that's applicable to people.
All right, great. Perhaps we can dive a bit deeper into some more particular questions which people may have, which I'll open the floor a bit later. Mm-hmm. But money is often a taboo subject, personally, never mind in professional relationships. So how should we start having conversations about money or financial distress, particularly as employees?
If I may, you picked up on a very sort of key point there, actually, Roy, in terms of sort of money or financial circumstances are almost a taboo subject. It's actually, I think the research showed that people are more willing to talk about their sexual preferences and their sort of then talk about their money side of it. So it just shows how much of a taboo it really is in terms of trying to get people to open up about money, open up about their financial situation. And if they do so, it's important to sort of see, well, who would they feel most comfortable to do that with? So I think that's quite a sort of, and it's not necessarily just in sort of professional settings, but also in personal settings. And so I think we all find ourselves, who was the last person you sort of, apart from if you have an advisor or if you had a sort of a money guidance sort of advisor, you would be happy to talk to them, but would you talk to your family members, your partner, your spouse? There are very different sort of elements of how much you let people in when it comes to finances, which I find, even talking as a financial planner, we sit in front of clients, husband and wife, who may have never had those conversations together. And in fact, we also find that having conversations separately bring out different outcomes from what each individual may probably want to sort of say, or want to sort of their joint goals and individual goals. So it's quite a revelation.
Right. So, I mean, someone said just picking up on that, someone mentioned in the chat box that their workplace definitely doesn't have a financial wellbeing policy. And it would be really helpful, not just for him, I think for all of us, to understand what exactly should be included in such a policy, because someone else mentioned it's part of a kind of general policy. It's covered under a policy offering things like mental health support, particularly over the pandemic and those who are furloughed, which sounds great. But what should employees be thinking about as far as a financial wellbeing policy is concerned? What are the particulars?
Should I take that one?
I was going to say, please do.
Okay, so we are not experts in HR, as you know, and policy making. So for me, well, the first thing I would say is definitely the place I would go. I put the link in is CIPD, because they are the ones who are really, you know, they have the credibility. They have done amazing evidence-based research as well on financial well-being. So I think when it comes to building up the policy, they would be the best resource to consult. When it comes to the well-being policy in generic terms, and building up well-being policy, what's important about that is to make sure that the policy is not a tick box exercise. You know, we do a lot for mental health and all other areas of well-being. In order to achieve that successful behavior change, it's very important to include within the policy as well, and to improve well-being in general, is to take a holistic approach. So, you know, include all the areas, not physical, the mental, the emotional as well, could be the social, because that's also important, and environmental. So it's defining, you know, what are those areas, and because it's a workplace, the career one and the job will be very important as well. Balancing, as I mentioned, short-term and long-term. You know, it's what can we do now? What do we need to do now for the employees? And how can we support their longer-term behavior change? Because behavior is not going to change overnight. That's the key. We can give people, you know, the knowledge piece. So for example, we have this webinar, we can talk about financial well-being, but is that really going to change behaviors? It's the knowledge piece. You know, we need the skills part to put it into practice. So how are you going to do that? And making sure that there's something else that we work on in the long term. You know, how can we build on? But it's a program you build around it, or you offer, some organizations offer financial coaching. So what's really important, it has to be integrated, you know, integrated into everything that you do. Encouraging flexibility and adaptability. How can we do that? And it has to be personalized and individualized. You know, what are the different channels that you need to deliver it? What are the styles? Who are the people who are best placed to give out that message? So first of all, you need to find out what is important for people in the organization. You know, there are lots of, we will talk a little bit about, you know, everything that we do regarding money and finances relates to financial well-being and the policy, whether we talk about pensions, whether we talk about benefits, all the incentives you have, sickness, you know, everything that you have, performance reviews. So it has to be integrated as part of everything else. And looking at, you know, that cumulative effect, or as you can see my butterflies, you know, what is the butterfly, what is the effect it's going to have? How can we, what are we trying to achieve? What is the big picture, if that helps?
I think I'm sort of adding to that, and very important as well, because obviously it's about the individuals themselves, right? So you can have that sort of macro, or the sort of the sort of overall policy that covers various elements of the well-being, but then parts of it then individual, making it very specific to the individuals, and that probably only ever comes to having one-to-ones, because in sort of workplace environments, when we talk, what Andrea mentioned about sort of pensions and sort of employee benefits, we find, or I've found, that there are sort of employers who have fantastic benefits in place, but the engagement is not there from employees. Either they don't know, or it happens to be at an initial conversation when they initially joined the business, and there was a whole list of benefits that were put as part of a contract. Great, but they only saw the monetary side, never valued in what those benefits actually mean in terms, if they were to put a financial sort of amount on those, you know. So it's important to sort of put that in I suppose individually to them, because obviously each person will have a different aspect of that would benefit them, or they may need help with. So it's quite opening. And I think the hardest part with any sort of communications within employer and employee, especially with any sort of well-beings or so, is actually engagement, where it's great to have that warm, fuzzy feeling, sort of creating the benefits, but if nobody engages with it, then you're very limited in what you're providing. The employer may think we do all this, but if nobody knows about it or doesn't engage with it, then you're having a mismatch there, right?
Quite right. Thank you both. And I'll come to a benefit question, which I've been sent privately in a moment. But prior to that, someone else has put in the chat box a point of view that employers should not be allowed to expect employees to keep quiet about their salaries, especially law firms. And then there's a bit of further discussion about solicitors regulation authority, transparency requirements, etc. But from your points of view in the realm of financial well-being, where do you sit on that line of opinion about employers having this sort of unwritten convention, as it were, at times, of expecting their employees not to talk about their salaries, etc.?
I think from my perspective, when it comes to responsibilities, and I think it just goes back to financial well-being and what Hiren talked about, and the question you asked about money being a taboo topic, you know, how can we expect to talk about it if there's an element that we can't talk about? So it is a bit controversial, but for me, when it comes to well-being, and you know, it has to be it also always depends on the culture of the organization as well. There has to be a culture of openness and collaboration. So if the openness is not there, we can do anything that we want to do. We can have the basics, we can learn what we need to do, but maybe the mindset and the attitude element that shows in the behaviors is not going to be there, which this is an example of. We can say we're doing a lot for financial well-being, but we can't and not allowed to talk about certain things. For me, I can probably only comment on this individually. For me, I've noticed that with other people around me, I do say, you know, I do talk more openly about money, but I can notice around me that it might not be so obvious. But with responsibilities, I think today's topic as well, it's very important. It has to be a collaboration and work together. And I just use like the three-pronged. It has to be the employee, the employer, and whether it's the government, you know, or society, because that social aspect is really important as well. You know, people will do what everybody else is doing. The comparisons as well is really important. So unless we're all in it, the three elements together, it's not really going to work. But I don't feel I'm in a position, I cannot advise and say, yes, employers should allow employees to disclose.
I think there's a lot of work that is being done, as you've mentioned there, with the SRA sort of requirements and transparency requirements. I think I'm seeing more of it, but I don't believe we're there yet, and there's still work to be done. But I think it does allow for individuals who are applying for, in my personal opinion, applying for roles or applying for things, to be able to then manage expectations or manage what they need to be sort of having as their own, knowing their own sort of finances, to whether it's actually going to be something that they don't waste time on applying effectively. It's a better use of time, right? both for an employer and an employee. So it's being efficient in that way as well, I would have thought. It sort of almost does a natural selection or picks up a form. So I do believe I'm for solicitors regulation authority, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Quite right.
Okay.
Quite right, yes. And I think a number of you guys have picked up on some really good points, and there's some really good thoughts in the chat box as well. And the last thing I'll just pick up on before going to this next question, which is it really therefore something to do with how workplaces promote financial well-being, as most workplaces have these separate policies in place, but tied up under one umbrella? And I would suggest, I'll give leave to the financial well-being experts in a moment, but from an employment point of view, from an employment law point of view, I think the answer is simply yes. There's no legal requirement for a financial well-being policy to be had. Of course there isn't, but I think particularly at this person's workplace, where you've got separate policies tied up under that one umbrella of financial well-being, makes complete sense. I had a consultation with someone this morning who was saying he's actually looking at bringing a potential claim against his employer because it turns out that there is a clear discrepancy between his pay and someone of the same managerial level. And a number of employers fall under this trap because on the one hand, they'll say, we're doing gender pay gap reporting. But that, of course, is only a snapshot of people on the same levels of similar jobs, which doesn't really help. But if there was more transparency, employers would certainly save themselves from claims from both women and men bringing on claims by saying, well, it seems the only difference between me and this person is our gender, and we're doing the same or similar work, and so I'm going to bring a claim. Whereas if there was more transparency, whether there were pay scales or salaries were negotiated or not, it would certainly save employers a heck of a load of trouble. So thank you very much for those thoughts. By the way, if you'd rather unmute yourselves and say something, is completely up to you, or continue to use the chat. One question I've had in, which I'll give leave to either you or Hiren or Andrea to answer, is it important to consider pension planning, even though I'm in my late 20s? Fingers are pointing at Hiren. Hiren, over to you.
Well, it's never too late. And I would say that if those know where we do planning, because even from the day that an individual is born, they're able to contribute into a pension. So I think a day in would be too late, but it's probably not possible from where they would be. And so you can effectively, because everybody has the allowances. Even if you're not working, you could potentially actually contribute up to the sort of annual allowances, which is just over £3,600. You'd get tax relief. So even not having employment, you could still be contributing into a pension and getting tax relief up to that maximum. So in terms of putting some relative notes in every 10 years that you would actually want to sort of contribute. This is one of the superhumans joining us.
Hello, superhuman.
So every 10 years that you start behind, you'd have to do double the effort. So assume somebody in their 20s doesn't start and starts in their 30s, they would have to do twice that at that level. Okay. Okay.
Talking about pension planning, it's very exciting stuff.
That's what excited her to come in and put in her moment. So just shows you.
Well, I'm surprised my two haven't screamed or joined in at some point. So it's going to happen to one of us. That's part of life now. Thank you. But I think you raised a really important point, because, I mean, of course, I know you will have much more sophisticated knowledge and understanding on this point of pensions, and much more sophisticated software in terms of pension planning and what that looks like. There are equally, of course, links elsewhere that one can think, okay, I'm putting in X a month, my employer's putting X a month, what will that look like by the time I'm 65 or 68 or whatever age we're supposed to be, but by the time we can retire in the future. And in actual fact, when we're looking at the bare minimum, it's quite startling how short a period of time that takes us. And hence it's ever the more important not to just expect that the bare minimum that we're putting into our pensions is going to last us the amount of time we may want it to. I mean, fine, if you want to work until you drop dead, that's of course your choice. But in the main, for those of us who may want to retire much earlier, or at least as soon as possible, financial planning and well-being is really important, and employers perhaps ought to have a greater discussion with their employees instead of just saying, yep, you're auto-enrolled, we're going to give our X%, you put in your X%, and employees sit back and think, yeah, I'm going to be absolutely safe by the time I'm of retirement age. When the reality is, and I appreciate I'm speaking more generally, and probably much more on your ground, but the reality is that's really not the case. What do you guys say to that?
Do you know what, that's a great point. If I don't mind, I'll come in on here, because I find a lot, auto-enrollment has been great because it's actually brought pensions to the forefront of thinking. And sort of employees, because previously by default, now it's default that you are added to a scheme, providing that you have the minimum earnings. Previously you had to opt in. Now you have to opt out. So that's a great way of actually getting sort of engagement. But then again, I think education plays a big part of that, because what typically, especially if you are as an individual struggling with finances, struggling with sort of money, or have some financial distress, if you look at your payslip and find a deduction which becomes a pension, and you, well, actually, I don't want that deduction to happen. The opt-out is always going to be the preferred sort of method. But then when we talk about sort of doing group sort of seminars with employers and talking about benefits, and we look at sort of auto-enrollment engagement, generally speaking, once you have that understanding with an employee as to say, well, this is the reasons why auto-enrollment has been brought in, because I don't know if the state pension is going to be around by the time you retire. So that onus is being passed on to the individuals to look after their own retirement. Then it becomes very much, well, if that, because everybody relies on that state pension, if it's not going to be there, what will be the case? To get a full state pension equivalent in private savings, you need to have over £600,000-700,000 in a pension pot. Now, who would potentially have that sort of planning in there with their sort of 3% or 4% per annum that's being annum that's been deducted from their salary? So educating that piece to say, furthermore, if you opted out, that employer's contribution is not going to be something they can give you any other way. So it's effectively free money from the employer that you are getting because you're putting something in. It's a combined effort of you, your employer, and the taxman to look after your retirement. So if 3 people working towards my retirement is a better place to be than just myself.
Quite right. And it sounds so elementary now that I think about it, but you raised a really good point that I've never thought about before, which was actually, what if there is no state pension by the time I'm of retirement age? Because part of the calculations are often, oh yeah, the state's going to give me X amount, and I appreciate it's not millions, but it's certainly something, and something's better than nothing. But hypothetically speaking, there's no point thinking about the most utopian view. We've got to kind of cater for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you again. I really love that point. I want to ask a question to put in the chat box, but if anyone else has got thoughts, you're welcome to add them in some way, shape, or form. And that is, has anyone here ever experienced or know of any cases where financial worries or distress is a potential cause of stress, sickness, or absence? At least from my own experience in terms of case law, I had a case about 4 years ago now, and it really stuck with me on this particular point, because it was a woman who had been working for an employer for a number of years, and it turned out that there was a significant discrepancy in terms of pay, and she'd raised various grievances and appealed with their employer, who frankly wasn't willing to listen. And I think because of the stress and the sickness that whole experience caused, and I appreciate this was quite a extreme scenario, but she actually had a miscarriage because of all of that. The amount of stress and strain that all caused in terms of family planning for the baby, etc., what was going to happen, that, at least it appeared to be the case, had that much of an effect on her, which is why, in my view, a topic like this is really important. It's not just kind of basic, hey guys, make sure you have a pension, but it can really affect people in various ways and shapes and forms. And someone has put in the chat that actually, for that particular person, financial worries are definitely a significant cause of stress and sickness and absence in terms of contributing factors. I wonder whether anyone here knows of anyone in that regard, or wants to share anything in that regard, or whether Hiren or Andrea, whether any of your clients have come from this viewpoint.
Kyle wants to say.
I was just thinking, I know in a previous company there was someone who, because of lack of financial well-being experience, they made a lot of decisions which then made them fall into a lot of debt, short-term lenders and all these kind of spirals that they fell into. And it definitely resulted in terms of their performance at work. They were stressed all the time. It caused them to be sick a lot of the time, asking colleagues. There was a lot of things that happened. And it all comes down to having that education on how to look after your finances so you don't fall into any pitfalls. So definitely I'm getting some points that we can bring into our company to ensure we can't stop that happening. It's everyone's individual business, but at least we can make sure that education is there.
That's
Great point.
And you could potentially stop it, actually.
That's
in the sense of, if you have the education, because I was just looking at another CIPD when they were talking about, you know, what works for financial well-being policies is the education part. Because just imagine somebody coming to that organization and being educated before they get into that situation. So maybe for that individual not, but for everybody else within the organization, and for ourselves as well, because we all, employers, individuals as well, is it will make a difference. Education makes a difference because at least you have the knowledge and the skills. And the other element, which probably relates to your previous question, Kyle, as well, is credit counseling and debt management programs. You know, those are the other aspect that does work for employers, and there's lots of, you know, resources out there. You need a specialist for that, you know, but the reason we are passionate, as you can probably see, we're passionate about financial well-being. We did a certification program, so we both certified financial coaches, because you know, that is something where it takes it above and beyond the education side. My background is in training and development and education, so we can do the education, but that's like, you know, it's the give a man a fish and then you'll feed him for a day, but teach him how to fish, you'll feed him and his family for a lifetime. So it's about changing mindsets, attitudes, and futures. You know, you can, the power of coaching and that one-to-one individual support and mindset change can be like, I don't know, for me it's mind-blowing. Like, you know, we know ourselves, both of us come from a lived experience. I mean, Hiren can talk about his story.
Yeah.
We didn't have money. We didn't have money growing up, and you know, my family did not have the education that they could have had, and we found out, you know, when things were really bad. You know, it's not talking about it, put your head in the sand, things will just resolve themselves. And then it turned out by the time we realized what was going on, and it was disastrous for relationships as well. You know, the shame that's brought, it's so complex. It's actually took, because of financial coaching, not because of the certification. I realized I've been doing this for a long time, but it's that mindset change, and things can improve. And if you approach it the right way, even in my family, it took 10 years, but actually we're okay, you know, in the sense, I mean.
You know, it's a great point Andrea sort of brings up there, is actually sort of that lived experience, because when you talk about sort of bringing in education, for myself personally, it was sort of early on when sort of money was given out to when you went at university. You know, money is handed to you as student loans, student sort of bank accounts, overdrafts. You're 18. You worked out ways into actually sort of, well, I personally was being a little bit more so clever, I thought, but many were doing it, where you went to different institutions and you got sort of the same levels of lending from 3 rather than the 1. So you end up being more in debt, not realizing it's free money. And then one thing that affects is your credit rating. And then guess what? Your starting from life becomes where you are not in a position to get any, you know, when you need it most, sort of thing. So knowing the information I know now, I would probably be guarding my credit file like a ninja back when I'm sort of 17, 18, as opposed to sort of getting those problems, because it takes years. Because once you get sort of a bad rating, it's about 6 years of things to actually fall off your rating. Those could be important years of your life when you're in early 20s, families that are being created, relationships or so. So these are all debts affected. You couldn't possibly get a mortgage. You couldn't get sort of a home. You couldn't get, so all of these things are sort of stepped. But it's important for sort of whether it's education, which is the starting point, the bare blocks of it. You're also getting guidance, because people assume having financial advice is you need money first to get advice, to then sort of, it's also building sort of that coaching element in it, because how many lottery winners you've heard of that are actually sort of 10 years on without the millions that they won? Now that comes down to mindset, how they manage money, or how they've actually sort of, so again, it's those financial behaviors that you're really trying to get to the bottom of and trying to change mindset on.
Right. Thank you. And thank you, Superhero. I think that's a really good point, which you've all shared. And thank you, Carl, for your points of view on that. I was actually about to ask you and sort of put out the question, well, how can employees then have better conversations with their employers? But then I thought to myself, why are we giving the employees all the work here? Wouldn't it be great if employers actually started that conversation with their staff? And I appreciate HR and line managers. If you're watching this, you're thinking, oh, for goodness sake, we have enough of on our plates already. And I'll come to a potential solution in a moment. But wouldn't it be great if employees were able to sit down with their line managers, or perhaps a trusted individual objective like HR, for example, just kind of go through, okay, you're on 35,000, like, what's actually comfortable for you? 40, 45, great. How can we help you get there? And look at steps of helping their employees in terms of that financial management. And then again, I thought to myself, right, HR, line management, you're probably thinking, for goodness sake, that's an extra thing to learn. But then I wonder, and I genuinely wonder, Hiren, Andrea, I then had a thought, what if employers were able to engage in financial consultants to actually come into the workplace instead for an hour or whatever the case may be, and actually talk to the staff about financial well-being and kind of cover some of these topics we've talked about, which I appreciate HR line managers may not necessarily be aware of themselves, and then give their employees, whether funded through work or some kind of benefit or otherwise, the ability to engage in either you guys as consultants, or at least just pick up their financial literacy a bit better, to save employees like the one which Kyle had mentioned earlier from going down that downward spiral. Everyone can see it, but no one does anything about that.
And I think it's not, it's not just necessarily, somebody in debt or they can't talk about it. Often we forget that financial challenges or difficulties can just literally be the root cause of health issues, because it's stress in itself. So it could be health issues, could be malnutrition, could somebody's not turning up, absence, could be lateness, sickness, but it also impacts productivity, decision making, and concentration. So from looking at me, you might think, oh, well, I don't know what's wrong with her. I mean, I'm probably with my age, it could even be menopause, who knows? But it's, people think, what's going on? She's not doing well, she's not concentrating. Absenteeism is one thing. I don't think I have ever met anybody who actually said I was off because due to, I don't know, financial stress, I ended up being physically sick or certain things like that. And it's also presenteeism. We might be at work, but not actually doing our best, not working, because we're constantly going, how am I going to pay? I know my bills are coming in. When am I going to get my pay? How am I going to pay for that? How am I going to do that? And like some people literally to the point, they could be new, because don't forget, we also have to look at the stage they're in. They might be new in their career. They might be, like you mentioned, you have kids, you have different priorities and worries than me. I'm at a different stage, but I have my worries. If I decide to worry, what's going to happen in 3 years' time? Because that's the way I am. I'm a planner. I'm already worrying about how am I going to have that money in 3 years' time, which I will need that money, or for the holiday or something like that. And you learn to plan, you build the skills, but it's it can be very complex. And how do you bring that in? And I mean, there's no secret here. I work with Hiren, but there's certain things I will not discuss with him, because I have my, I have my coach that I go to. I go to money dates and things like that, where it's easier for me to discuss certain things with other people. So there is that element. They also say, when it comes to coaching and helping, you're not supposed to, you can't coach your family members, you can't coach your friends and things like that. which I have done and I've been, but it's very challenging because it's,
it's more difficult to leave your biases at the door when you are in them with them after that door closes.
Yeah.
So I
So
think
sometimes, it is better to have that, like the doctor, there's certain things about your health, you're not going to go and discuss it at the workplace and things like, which is, there is certain things that that's not the person or the place. So I think sometimes, something you mentioned before here, like, everybody has their, you have your GP, so you go to your doctor for something, you go to your financial advisor for something,
I do believe as part of that team, and I agree, a financial coach also is actually somebody who would be very much a valuable resource, even from an employer's point, because it's not about necessarily sort of looking at advice with what they have, is actually the individual's money story, right? What did they hear about money when they were growing up? What forms their biases towards money today, right? Those are the more important things that would sort of build the building blocks, is that behavioral change. And then when they do receive money, they know how or why they've made decisions. I've sat with clients and we said, right, great. As financial planners, we're sort of built to building a sort of a solution-based thing. This is what you have. This is what you need to do. This is what, go away and do that. Then the individual is up to them for their behaviors, whether they'll have blocks, they'll stop them doing things. They don't want to do it because they've heard of something or the other where they grew up, where money was scarce, possibly. So they don't want to let go. They want to see money in an account because it makes them feel that they are sort of safe, you see? So it's those types of individual stories and abilities that make it more thing. And something that I might be doing, Roy, I see Francesca said, it's about sort of increasing retention within the workplace when you talk about sort of time and money saved in recruitment. So in terms of, I'm sure with sort of many, there may be cases within employment law where you get to that fast stage where it's too late to then sort of make any amends. If they'd actually spoken to employees earlier in that journey, you would have actually sort of overcome many of the elements of the evidence that's being placed at that later stage, right? You may bring it back into your court.
Right. And so perhaps a quick question before we kind of narrow down into closing. Does WENSONS actually, do you work with employers in terms of coming in and providing that kind of financial literacy or assistance in terms of being that person to come in and train staff in financial well-being?
Absolutely. We have the two sides to our sort of group, where we have the WENSONS Legacy, which deals with financial coaching, legacy planning, and financial well-being, which I believe it's probably the starting point. And we've almost gone a full circle here, where we've sort of have a regulated side to the business, where it's sort of if an advice is required on pensions, investments, so we can do that. We're FCA regulated business, but the legacy side is where, if I'm perfectly honest, where our passions lie, because it's about the individual stories, helping individuals where there's guidance required, where things, and that's probably excites me more so than on the regulator side, if I'm honest, because it's about seeing those changes, those things. So yes, WENSONS do work with employers specifically to be able to sort of put in place what they would like to achieve for the outcomes for their employees, and hopefully that involves sort of financial well-being as part of that overall strategy.
And I think also and then we do, like, we launched something, I did several workshops on financial well-being, whether it's, for local businesses, or I did it at a local charity. We did an online one for apprentices. So there's lots of opportunities for funding as well from employer side. But what I would say is very, very important, whoever you go to and whoever you consult, like there are resources on NHS, Mind, charity, you might have mental health first aiders, everybody has a pension provider. So the provider, will help every organization, individuals, you have banks, or you are a bank yourself, financial institutions. So all the financial institutions as well do a lot. So there's so many resources out there. What I would always say is just make sure that you get whatever support you get and whatever help you get credible ones. It has to be something that's accredited, something that's credible, something that will make a difference, not just tick box exercise. And if that makes sense. So just reach out to the people. You already have lots of people in your network. We can help as well. But whatever you do is just make sure that, you know, the resources you reach out to.
And I think it's probably to add to that, even the current climate with the current challenges where you're seeing with regards to, you hear the headlines, you hear the noise around inflation, around sort of price increases, so it's about ensuring that individuals, even especially just going just at the later end of the pandemic, there's a lot of been challenges with regards to people's individual circumstances and the stresses and things being with money, or even just general well-being as well, mental well-being and so as well. So I think it's ensuring that we are more in touch with individuals than we may have been in the past.
Quite right. Thank you both. So in closing, any final nuggets from you to share with everyone?
Well, for me personally, I believe something that you may already have if you're employed. You have to look further into the benefits that your employer provides, because there are certain things such as employee assistance programs that are always attached with regards to sort of existing benefits, and they're all available to you at no cost and already provided to you. And the engagement part is probably my one key takeaway, to actually sort of inquire with existing employers. And if you're an employer, have a further look at the benefits that you already provide, because most of those will also have an ability to provide further sort of programs or so to help your employees. So it's happy to sort of provide a second opinion, or be able to sort of help if it's something that you don't know where to go for. Feel free to sort of get in touch, and we're always happy to help. I don't know if Andrea has anything as a part, anything where we are.
I could go on, is it the next hour? Don't worry. Yeah, but we're here. We're happy. You know, feel free to follow us. We are on social media, so follow our company page if you haven't done so already. And you know, you can find lots of resources, because we're members of the Initiative for Financial Wellbeing. We also associate members of the Personal Finance Society. So there's a lots of, you know, resources and the knowledge piece that we share, and you know, we're happy to give advice, give guidance from the legacy side as well, and you know, work with individuals or organizations as well, just to
Absolutely.
even as a consultant, you know, whether it's consultancy, coaching,
and without obligation as well. So that sort of just ensures that people are being have or find the right resources and have the access and can make some informed decisions or so as well. So I think that's always the starting point for us. Yeah.
Super. Thank you very much, both.
Thank you, everyone.
Really grateful for your time, Hiren and Andrea. Really grateful to all of you who could attend today. And if you couldn't attend, but you're watching the recording, well, thank you very much. Do take care, first of all, of yourselves and, of course, your finances. But for now, it's goodbye from Hiren.
Goodbye, everybody.
Your superheroes in the background when they were there. It's goodbye from Andrea.
Bye.
Thank you. And it's goodbye from me. Goodbye.
Thank you for having us.